On October 29th, 2025, something swung past the sun and started leaving this solar system forever. It will never come back, it will never slow down, and it was never born here. The object is called 3I Atlas. It is older than the sun, older than the earth, older than the ground under your feet, a frozen splinter of some other world, a world that died billions of years before the first morning ever broke over this planet. And for a few short months, it crossed your sky. So what made it? What kind of place builds a thing like this, and then flings it across the galaxy, straight through your backyard? This is the most closely studied visitor in the history of astronomy, and the truth it reveals is stranger than aliens. To understand how strange this is, hold one number in your head: 3. In the entire history of human astronomy, every telescope, every night sky, every star ever charted, humanity has caught exactly 3 visitors from beyond this solar system. The first was Oumuamua in 2017. The second, a comet named Borisov in 2019. And the third is the one tearing past you right now. It was spotted on July 1st, 2025, by a NASA-funded survey telescope sitting in Rio Hurtado, Chile, a quiet machine that scans the dark for things that move. When astronomers looked back through older images, they found it had already been there, unnoticed, since early May, a ghost in the data nobody had thought to look for. Then they measured its path, and the path made no sense. Every comet you have ever heard of travels in a loop. It falls toward the sun, whips around, and comes home. In a year, a century, 1,000 years. This one does not loop. Its orbit carries an eccentricity of around 6.14, a number that means one cold, final thing. The path is not a circle, it is a line. It came in from the dark, it will leave into the dark, and it will never return. It is moving at roughly 130,000 miles an hour, cutting an almost perfectly straight scar across the sky. And still, that tells you nothing about the only 2 questions that matter. Where did it come from, and how old is it? Think of a single shard of ice and stone falling silently through the blackness between stars for longer than the Earth has existed, until the day it finally brushed against the light of one small, ordinary sun. Yours. Start with its age. The best estimates put 3I Atlas at up to 11 billion years old. Let that land for a second. The sun is 4.5 billion years old. This thing is more than twice that. It was already ancient when the cloud that would form the sun was still just gas and dust. It is older than the Earth, older than the oceans, older than the very idea of a day, or a year, or a sunrise. The water locked inside it is older than the rock you are standing on. So where do you build something that old? Not here. Astronomers traced its chemistry back to a part of the Milky Way called the thick disk, an old, cold, lonely region of the galaxy. It formed there before its parent star was even born, inside a planetary system that assembled itself by completely different rules than the one you live in. It isn't a rock. It's a fossil, a frozen relic of a world that is already long dead. And then they looked at the water, and the water was wrong. When researchers analyzed it, published in Nature Astronomy in April of 2026, they found something no comet in this solar system has ever shown. Its ice is loaded with deuterium, heavy water, at least 30 times more of a certain heavy water signature than the comets born around the sun. In plain terms, this ice froze in a cold so deep, so absolute, that nothing in your entire corner of space comes close to it. It remembers a temperature the sun has never reached, in a place no human will ever stand. And sit with what that age really means. When this ice first locked into place, there was no Earth for it to fall toward, no sun to catch it. The atoms that would one day become you were still buried inside other stars, waiting to be forged. For longer than this planet has had a surface, longer than there has been an ocean or a single living cell, this object did one thing, and one thing only: It fell. Through a cold with no bottom, a dark with no edge, past stars igniting and stars burning out, past the slow turning of the whole galaxy, and it never stopped. Not once, not in 11 billion years. Nothing you have ever touched is that old. Nothing you will ever see is that patient. By now you might be wondering why a single comet earned this kind of attention. So was everyone else, which is what makes the next part hard to overstate. The whole world turned to watch it. Hubble locked onto it on November 30th, SphereX in December. TESS opened a special observation window in mid-January. Parker's solar probe watched. SOHO watched. NASA's Europa Clipper and Europe's JUICE spacecraft photographed it from two sides at once, in ultraviolet light. The giants on the ground joined in. The VLT, Gemini South, Subaru, all of them in December pointed at the same faint, ancient smudge of light. A single dead chip of ice from another star, and humanity aimed nearly every great eye it owns at it, at the same moment, holding its breath. Stop for a second and ask why. Why aim that much of humanity's attention at one faint speck crawling across the dark? Because this is the rarest chance there is. A sample of another solar system, delivered to your doorstep, and gone within a handful of months. Miss it, and the next one might not come for decades. If you have ever stood outside on a clear night and wondered whether anything out there is looking back, that feeling, the one that keeps you watching videos like this at 1 in the morning, hold on to it. It matters for where this story goes. Subscribe if you want to follow the rest of it, because the strangest part hasn't happened yet. Here is where it got personal. In early October, 3I/Atlas slid past Mars, close enough that a camera built to map a planet's surface, high-rise on the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, turned outward to catch it. Then on December 19th, it passed Earth. At a safe distance, around 168 million miles, but it passed. This 11 billion-year-old shard of a dead world came through the same patch of space you call home, and most people never even looked up. And that is when the math stopped feeling clean. Because if it is older than the sun, if it came from somewhere colder than anything known, if it only passes through once and never returns, then why was its orbit so strange, so precise, that one of the most respected scientists at Harvard stood up in front of the world and said the thing nobody wanted to say out loud? For a while, one answer hung in the air, and it was the one that gets headlines. Avi Loeb, a physicist at Harvard, started listing the things about 3I Atlas that bothered him. It seemed to accelerate in ways gravity alone couldn't explain. Its density looked strangely low, almost as if parts of it were hollow. Its path lined up unusually well with the flat plane of the Milky Way. One by one, the anomalies stacked up. He argued that the simplest explanation for all of them, taken together, might not be a rock at all. It might be a piece of technology. He put the odds at something near 40%. Then came what he called the 13th anomaly. The object passed almost exactly along the edge of Jupiter's gravitational boundary, its Hill sphere, matching it to within a sliver, about 60,000 kilometers across a journey of billions of miles. By April of 2026, his list had grown to 22 separate things that, in his words, did not add up. He even staked $1,000 on it, betting that data gathered before 2030 would settle the question one way or the other. And if you were alive in 2017, this should feel familiar, because this is the echo of Oumuamua, the last interstellar object Loeb suggested might be an alien sail. So, is it a ship? No. When the world's radio astronomers pointed their dishes at it, the Breakthrough Listen project, scanning for any artificial whisper, they heard nothing. No signal, no transmission. Their limit was sharp enough to catch a transmitter putting out less than 0.2 of a single watt. That is roughly the power of the phone in your hand. And from this object, across all of that listening, Silence. Every promising blip traced straight back to human radio interference here on Earth. Not a beacon, and not behaving like a machine either. It grew a coma, a glowing cloud of gas. It grew a tail. It vented material as it warmed near the sun. It brightened exactly the way an icy body should. Its nucleus is round. Outside of Loeb's small circle, almost no planetary scientist takes the technology idea seriously, because the evidence simply does not support it. The astronomer Jason Wright put it best. Comets, he said, are like cats. They have tails, and they do precisely what they want. For every single anomaly on that list, there are a dozen plain, ordinary, comet-like explanations sitting right beside it. Take the acceleration that haunted Loeb. A comet needs no engine to speed up. As it nears the sun, its ice flashes straight into gas and jets off one side. A soft, natural shove, watched on comet after comet for over a century. The low density that looked hollow? Comets are loose rubble and frozen gas, more snowbank than solid stone. The eerie alignment with the galaxy's plane? That is simply where old interstellar drifters are born. One by one, the anomalies don't disappear. They just turn ordinary, so science closes the case. It's a comet. But here is the part nobody tells you. That answer doesn't make this story less frightening. It makes it worse. Because the truth doesn't need aliens at all. Here is what 3I/Atlas truly is. It is a chemical fossil. A surviving fragment of a planetary system that formed, lived, and died around a star that no longer matters. A star that may not even exist anymore. The ice it carries was frozen into place somewhere far out in the dark, and then it drifted. For 10 to 12 billion years, it fell through the empty space between the stars, carrying the chemistry of another world, untouched, unwitnessed, until it grazed the warmth of the sun and lit up just long enough to be seen. And that is the gift hidden inside the dread. Every interstellar comet is a message in a bottle from a place humanity will never reach. Inside this one is a direct sample of how a different solar system was built. Frozen in a colder fire, written in a chemistry unlike anything around you. It is proof. Proof that other worlds formed out there in the deep cold by other rules. And proof that every so often, one of them sends a splinter of itself sailing across the entire galaxy. This object was made before the Earth existed, before the sun ever caught fire, and it passed by exactly once, and it will not be the last. With a new generation of survey telescopes coming online, astronomers expect to find many more of these wanderers. 3I/Atlas is not the end of the story. It is the first knock at the door. So go back to that morning, October 29th, 2025. Right now, as you watch this, 3I/Atlas is already leaving, pulling away from the sun, gaining speed, slipping back toward the dark it came from. It will never return. All that will ever remain of it is a few months of data and the questions it left behind. So sit with this one. If a fragment of a dead world can drift all the way here after 11 billion years of falling, then how many others have passed silently overhead in all the long ages before anyone had a telescope to catch them? How many came and went while the sky was just the sky? And one day, long from now, a fragment of this Earth will drift across the sky of some other world, glowing once, witnessed by something or by nothing at all. Long after the last person who ever called this planet home is gone, it came out of the dark. It touched the light exactly once, and then it went home, carrying an answer that no one here will ever finish reading.